Welcome in, Minnesota United fans. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by co-host Manny Lagos. Manny, we are in the playoffs. It's all ready to go. Playoffs are here. Let's go, Manny.
Yeah, let's go. It was a fun night of soccer from a standing standpoint. Results standpoint for the last 2 weeks were amazing for us, and I don't think there's a lot of people that would have said with 2 games remaining, we would have clinched. And that is a super cool feeling. And given the adversity of this club over the last year and the changes and the kind of building what we were trying to do, I think it's a good day to kind of have a little bit of a smile on our faces because it's not easy to make the playoffs. It's really, really hard to do it consistently. And this club has done that over several years now.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful to be back in the playoffs, joined once again also by Jon Marthaler. Jon, how are we doing today? I know it's a quick turnaround from a late night soccer game, but here we are.
Oh, yeah. We got extra coffee this morning because I'm old and it's a school night and the game was at Mountain Time. And that's just, it shouldn't be allowed, is all I'm saying. And I do want to say, it might not be easy to make the playoffs, but 9 out of the 14 teams in the West make it. So it's not entirely difficult. You know what I'm saying?
I
It's
agree,
like making the NBA play-in. Like, if you count the play-in as a playoff, so as nobody does. It's not hard. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's not hard either.
Listen, we are back-to-back playing champions. No, but seriously, that was a Timberwolves joke, by the way.
Yep.
But seriously, though, you say that, but you look at teams like Chicago Fire, that are spending loads of money and haven't been in the playoffs for 7 years. And you've got a lot of the LA Galaxy have been in a rut up until this year. So I think you're right, but I also think it is not easy in this league of parity to get there. And we should be happy about that.
I do. I mean, it's like I happened to catch part of the Toronto game yesterday, and there was Federico Bernardeschi, who I think people know how people on this podcast feel about Federico Bernardeschi, but he's on a yellow card. He runs down, he grabs a guy around the neck, yanks him to the ground just to get himself sent off. Then he picks up the ball and boots it into the stands. Just absolute childish behavior. And I was like, man, Toronto is Toronto again. I can't believe it. And then I looked, and Toronto's still currently above the playoff line. They only have 1 game to go, where the rest of the team has 2. So I'm just saying, if Federico Bernardeschi might still make the playoffs, not easy. You're right about the Fire. You're right about a lot of teams, but not all that hard either.
Was it Toronto or DC who were in the same situation where they finished up their season last year and they were above the playoff line but knew they couldn't get in? I can't remember.
I think that was DC last year.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because Wayne Rooney left, and it was like, wait, there's still 1 week left to go, and it's like, schedule, they're done already and eliminated yet above the playoff line. I forget.
Hey, speaking of DC, and I know obviously it wasn't just about the Mountain Time game. I don't know if you obviously stayed up for the Portland and Dallas and San Jose game, which were wild, by the way, that Portland game. Holy cow, that DC Nashville game last night.
Wild.
It was basically the opposite of our game last night.
They took all of the goals.
Yes. And just all of the fun. Our game was was not easy on the eye of the average fan. It was definitely a defensive stalwart performance by us for sure. So
that was a tough one for a late night affair for sure.
Yeah. I'll take it. I think they'll be positive when we start talking about the game itself. But if we're going to the game itself, by the way, I go number 1, making the playoffs and clinching. Got to be excited about that. Number 2, by far, has to be the spitting incident. Holy cow. I mean,
we'll get to all of that for sure.
Yeah, if it hadn't been for Messi and Miami clinching the Supporters Shield yesterday, I think this would be way more in the front of every MLS storyline. It's going to eventually go to memes here because nobody's
spitting in the age of VAR. What are we doing? What are we doing?
It's just so rare. It's so rare, you know. I mean, whenever you want to get there, we'll start talking about it, though. That was surreal to see last night.
We'll talk about both of the games that Minnesota United played since we last recorded. We've got plenty to catch up on Major League Soccer, as we've already broken down. U.S. men's national team roster announced. There's plenty to catch up on. I think I want to start off with the big story of the day that's coming out here. We don't know at the time of recording the official nominees yet, but the end of the year award nominees are coming out today at some point. And I just kind of want to run through these quick and get your guys' opinion. I know the most controversial one will probably be MVP, so why not start there? Because the front runner is going to obviously be Lionel Messi because he's Messi, he's the GOAT, it's going to happen. But there obviously is that conversation because of the amount of games he's missed. He's played 17 games, has 30-plus goal contributions, while Luciano Costa, Evander are just two of the guys in that list who also have 30-plus goal contributions, but they've also played 30 and 26 games respectively. So there's a big conversation there of who's gonna be the MVP. And personally, I think I would probably give it to Acosta or Evander over Messi because of the amount of games they played. And I know that might be controversial, but I think that's where I stand in that because of the amount of games they played and their contributions towards their teams. Manny, I'll let you start because I know I feel like that one's controversial for you.
It's not. It's Messi.
Okay.
Like it's easy. At the end of the day, Evander maybe had a chance to be in the kind of discussion if he kind of elevated Portland to higher than fighting for their playoff lives in a 9-game team making the playoffs.
And that's totally fair. Yeah.
It is 100%. You have to not only get the points and score goals, you have to elevate your team to like a level. And the reality is Evander is outstanding, but Portland leaks goals and leaks games where they have to come from behind. And I think last night was another example of something isn't quite right there. And there could be a good argument that he's both what's good about Portland and what's bad. And ultimately, like they are a very wide open team. And is he a number 10 or is he an 8? Well, if he's an 8, doesn't really play a lot of defense, doesn't get around the field very well. So I'm not trying to be too here. He's had an amazing year, amazing player. I think almost any teams in the league right now would take his skill sets offensively. But when we're talking about MVP, I don't even think he's in the conversation. And then Acosta, for me, isn't in the conversation just because he was so much better last year. And I think Cincinnati's dropped a little bit their level. And he's been a little bit more inconsistent personally. I don't think it's controversial. I think it's Messi all day long.
John?
Well, I mean, I don't actually know if I have a postseason awards vote, but I think a lot is going to depend in terms of who's going to win it on how many of the voters are contrary and difficult like me. You know what I mean? Like, because if Messi doesn't win MVP, MLS will probably invent an award called Messi of the Year and award that to him, and that that'll be the new award. So I don't know if it really matters, but what I want to do. I really wish there was like one standout defensive midfielder or something like that we could give this award to, because that's who I'd like to vote for, just to be completely contrary. And 10 years ago, Kyle Beckerman, that's who I want to vote for this year, just to be with all the great attackers in the league. And that's just who I want to be difficult. But
I like it, Jonathan, but I just, you want to doubt Messi. You want to like be a little contrarian because it's fair. It's legit. You're like, hey, but then last night, freaking doing nothing in the first half in Columbus, and he brings the ball down, and I'm like, handball. And then you watch it again, you're like, holy shit. Like, he's the greatest player of all time.
Yeah. And
he is tearing up the league in ways that I did not expect. And it's happening. I mean, like, I get what you're saying. I get it. Like, if it's all league manufactured, I'm all on board with being like, you're right. But every time he plays right now, he is getting goals, getting assists. Their team just won the Supporters Shield. He's quiet for 80 minutes, but then leads them to wins. I don't know.
I know. And it's also hard because I want to be cynical, but also it's just genuine. It gives you genuine joy to watch him play soccer. You know what I mean? He does stuff and your heart just lifts and it's exciting. So it's really hard to be cynical. I have trouble pulling it off.
It is. And then, by the way, he's, kind of like saves his energy. So you're watching the game and you're like, gosh, are the fans getting their money's worth? He's kind of just jogging around, and then every game he finds his pockets, finds his moments, and starts some magic some way. So I just don't think there's any controversy for me personally, but
and you look, and he's amazing, and you look, and he's 49 years old somehow, and still at this level is it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to watch, but I want to be difficult about it.
Yeah, you can be difficult. Maybe there's a conspiracy where MLS calls Schulte and says, hey, don't put your wall right. So that free kick yesterday looks more brilliant than it actually is. That kind of stuff, I'm okay with that kind of conspiracy theory because
I like it.
That is like Columbus, how are you having like a 4-man wall at the top of the box, not covering the near post against Messi? Then I'm like, okay, maybe there is some MLS shenanigans going on
Yeah,
with this, but
I like
anyway,
it.
he somehow still scores them.
Well, I guess I'm the lone person here fighting against this tidal wave of Messi support. And don't get me wrong, I think he's been great. There's no denying that. It's just the amount of games he's missed and what they've done without him has me questioning whether I'll vote for him this year. But we'll see. I'll probably end up voting for him just because it makes sense. Supporter Shield, they're the best team in the league. It's not even close, and he's got the most goal contributions on that team, despite missing a number of games. Do you guys have a goalkeeper defender of the year that come to mind right away?
Christian Kalina's got the best numbers for a goalkeeper, so I think you got to vote for it. And it's not like, oh, this is shades of gray. He's got far and away the best numbers, so I think you gotta say that he's the goalkeeper of the year.
Yeah, 10
And
clean sheets for him. They've
yeah,
allowed, I'm pulling up the stats here. They've allowed what, 34 goals this season? 37 goals this season, which is second least in all of the Eastern Conference. It's been an
yeah,
impressive season for him.
yeah. As far as defender, I think a lot depends on whether we're gonna count wingbacks this year as defenders. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, is this
that's
is this
always
a
the
year where
question.
is this a year where a fullback can be a defender of the year? And then it's going to be, if you decide they do count, then it'll probably be Luca Orellano from FC Cincinnati because
Yeah.
he's got 15 goals. It's like the NHL where one random defenseman gets 22 goals. Oh yeah, absolutely, he's the defenseman of the year. Well, he hasn't blocked a shot all year, but sure, whatever. Everybody likes goals.
Manny?
Yeah, I can't disagree with either. I would start with the goalkeeper year might be like the lack of goalkeeping this year and the lack of goalkeeping for the U.S. national
Mm.
team. Like it feels like it wasn't a great year for goalies, to be honest. It feels like it. I just can't not a lot stand out. Certainly we'll get to it. I've got the homer side of me and like Dane St. Clair is probably one of the comeback players of the year for me. He's top 5 goal in the league right now. At least 3 clean sheets in a row. My brain right now this morning can't go past our last 3 games, but
Yeah.
um, he's elevated something. Leadership on the field. That save last night in the second half wasn't like he had to do a lot, but was just huge and outstanding save against Arango, which was just really one big moment he had to make for the team. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that Berkey really took a step back this year, and he was so good last year.
Yeah, I feel like Berkey went from being unbelievable to merely really good. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's hard to be like, well, I guess it's Berkey again. Because on the numbers, he's got a little bit of a case, but compared to last year, it's like, oh, he's so normal this year.
yeah. And I again, I don't want to. I want to disagree sometimes, but Oriano is the best left back, left wing back in the league, bar none this year. I mean, that's a pretty really good statement, and that bodes well for him because when you can really kind of not have a debate about who is the kind of best left back / wing back in the league, that means you're doing something really, really well, and he has taken the league by storm.
You
And
mentioned
if you got to give it to a center back, it'll just be Walker Zimmerman because it always is.
Oh, but did you see that miss last night? Ooh, wide open header over. Tough one. No, he's great too, and usually, but this year they've struggled, and he seemed to maybe not have his same kind of liveliness he's had the last couple of years in terms of leading Nashville. I think he is really goes where their team goes, and he hasn't been quite as good, and Nashville has not been very good either.
I think there's a very solid case that at least one Minnesota United player will win an award, and I don't think it's close for Robin Lod for comeback player of the year, unless I'm missing another player who made a spectacular comeback. Robin Lod coming back from injury and having the impact that he's had. There was a little dip in the middle of the season, but that went for the whole team. But when he's been on, this team has been firing on all cylinders, and I think Robin Lod probably, if I'm mistaken on this, probably should be one of the front runners for that award this year, Manny.
Yeah, I would say particularly for our team, I don't know what the rules are for comeback. How many games did he miss last year? Is it like how many weeks do you have to miss to then be kind of? I'm maybe going too diving into like small details, but I didn't know if he'd even qualify if he got X amount of games last year.
He only played 10 last year, so I
He
think
only
that should
he only played
qualify.
10 games last year.
Yeah,
Oh wow. Okay.
the injury took him out pretty early, so I think he would qualify. He should, because he was gone for much of the season, and you could see the impact of his absence. And now you've seen the impact of him being on the field for the team this year.
Well, then I like it. You're making a case because Robin's versatility is really what has been so impressive for us this year. His ability to kind of float into different positions, and Eric's ability to use them game by game within games. Again, last night, going into the midfield and kind of helping us deal with some of the pressure that RSL was putting on, and just he's been so versatile for us over the last couple of years. He can play so many different positions. I'll always support that. So right now I can't think of another one, but I like it. I like your throwing it out there.
John, do you have a contrarian pick for us?
I think the legal name Messi is the comeback player of the year because he got hurt for 3 games.
He came back from the ankle injury. He came back from injury. Copa America.
Yep. He's winning the newcomer of the year too, even though he's not a new somehow. I don't know how, but
will he win coach of the year or executive of the year?
I think it's possible. Don't rule him out. He'll be a finalist in every category.
Do we have a coach of the year nominee? Because there's that. I think that also is a very tough one. You've got Tata Martino in Miami. You've got Wilfred Nancy, Columbus, Greg Vanney in Los Angeles. There's a good couple nominees here. Chris Armas in Colorado for what their turnaround's been like this season, and the different kind of way they went about it. I think there's more of an argument here for a very wide open field.
Coach of the year is always kind of a strange award because it goes to the team who was good that nobody thought was going to be any good this year. So it's like the team that exceeded expectation, whoever's the coach of that team wins the award almost every year. Or if there's no clear cut, you just take the team that was the best and give it to that. So I guess Tata Martino is probably the front runner there. I think there's a few guys that have random cases, Eric Ramsey included. I think that he's got a story to tell about what the expectations were for Minnesota, but I think the fact that Minnesota is currently in 8th place and might get up to 7th place and maybe 6th place, not exactly the compelling case that you might have seen from past winners in terms of exceeding expectations.
Yeah, I'm with the guys you said are in the top 4. I think Armas probably leaks away for me. Just it seems like they're kind of tailing off now, depending on how they finish these last couple games. But I mean, it's a tight race between those 3. Vanney, the Galaxy are going to win the West, and that is a huge turnaround and really kind of taking over.
13th to 1st, I think that should get you front runner status.
I think that's probably front runner status, but I do think the heartstrings for these journalists are going to pull for Nancy or Tata. Just the romantic side of talking about soccer, which journalists sometimes fall for. I think
they're saying there's an East Coast bias.
I can hear you,
I know. That's why we have you on. You said it yourself. You're the contrarian here. So I have a hard time because they are all 3 have been so good in different ways. For example, Tata getting this team to play well without Messi is really a Herculean effort, and he really added a lot of young guys into a roster and got them at a level where he's got these aging Barcelona team playing with. So it's pretty impressive. And Nancy's just been lights out. I mean, come on. It's like I said, it was a tough one for them last night. They didn't play well for 90 minutes. They kept on making kind of comical errors, but they still were in the game and fought. Man, that's gonna be a tight race. That to me is probably the tightest race. Those 3, who gets it? I mean,
I will say I'm a little down on Greg Vanney's potential candidacy just because you look at the players they've had there and the players they've had in the past too. Like they finished 13th last year, but it wasn't like their talent level was all that low. It was like Greg Vanney finally lined up the amazing talent he has at his disposal in the proper way this year, as opposed to past years. I don't know. It's hard to look at a team that has that amount of attacking talent and then gets Marco Reus halfway through the year and be like, yeah, that guy is really coaching his butt off to get them up to the top of the conference. Good job, Greg Vanney. It's hard to make that case. But then again, I was the one who said that Tata Martino might be the front runner just because he's the best guy. Yeah, good job taking Messi and Busquets and Jordi Alba and getting those guys to play Suarez, well.
Yeah,
oh,
right.
Boy. Yeah, Suarez. I think I forgot one. Yeah, way to go, Tata.
Real tough job there. Yeah.
It must be tough. Must be
again,
a hard job.
This is that we Manny, you just said it. Like, is it coach of the year or coach of the last couple of years? Well, you got to block that out if you're going to coach for coach of the year. But I get it. I
Yeah.
get what you're saying. So
No coach has done a better job improving on him. He's the comeback coach of the year. That's what he is.
there he is. New thing.
The comeback coach of the year
is Messi. No,
really.
I thought we were going to name that to Messi.
2024 Greg Vanney beating out the worst coach of last year, 2023 Greg Vanney.
What a turnaround for Greg.
What
Vanney.
a turnaround. A personal turnaround for Greg Vanney.
That by far is to be the closest race. I think any of those three deserve it. Have had great years.
Yeah. Speaking of coaches, Mauricio Pochettino naming his first roster for the U.S. men's national team. Games coming up here in a couple weeks. 25-man roster. A bunch of things stick out. Zach Steffen back in the fold in goal. Aiden Morris called up in the midfield. 4 strikers, 2 wingers on this squad. Interesting roster for sure. What are your immediate takeaways, Manny?
I really thought when you said Zach Steffen, Manny was going to reach off screen, grab a bottle of vodka, just open it on camera and drink some. Like,
we did that last week when we were previewing the Colorado game.
I do that every time I think about our national team goalkeeper pool right now. But yeah, Zach's last 2 games, we had him live here, and 6 goals in 2 games he's given up. I'm happy for him, by the way. I think he's had a good year, and I think he's one of the things I love about this sport is we get to kind of pontificate and kind of throw stuff at walls about guys and our belief in them. And they can at times prove you wrong. And Zach has certainly grown into helping Colorado turn around their season and have a good, solid season. So I'm really happy personally that he got called up and that he's kind of reinvigorating his career, reinventing it, however you want to say it. And he's got a call up. So he should be incredibly proud. Ultimately, for me, the roster is fine. Again, I think so it runs a little bit like us, in terms of Eric Ramsey coming here. And it's going to take some time for him to get to know the guys and get to know what he likes and doesn't. And it might be a little chunky because we have been here watching our team for the last couple of years. He's got to catch up and see it. So I guess I'm not over analyzing this roster. It's kind of like it is what it is because he's got to start to get to know the guys and bring in some fringe guys and see where that goes. And so I'm more curious to see how he reacts to what he brings in and what he brings in next, basically, over the next couple months. And very similar to Eric about looking at what we have and what we need and where we're going to go. So ultimately, I'm like, great. But there was nothing that really stood out for me. I mean, it sounds like you've got a couple, though.
John?
I mean, I was hoping for a Jurgen Klinsmann, I'm smarter than everybody else roster, to be honest with you. Like 2 guys from college soccer, 3 USL championship guys, just absolute, upset the apple cart. Let's do this kind of random roster. And we didn't get that. So I guess Mauricio Pochettino isn't as brave as Jurgen Klinsmann in terms of changing U.S. soccer by making everyone in the world mad.
It did Morris make the roster?
Aiden Morris? Yeah. Yeah, he made the
Jordan
roster.
Morris.
Jordan Morris. No, he did not.
No, I was talking about Aiden Morris.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I think it's
Morris?
important. Yeah, I'm talking about the Morris that's at Middleborough. I think that was important inclusion. I think it's time we got to see if he can kind of just the way Pochettino plays, particularly, he's going to probably play the double pivot at some point here. So you maybe don't need as athletic of a guy in that position. Morris might actually fit really well in there. So I like that one. I listen. It's the beginning of our journey with Pochettino. So I'm going to be cautiously optimistic. I don't think there was anything too surprising for me.
I do think it's interesting to see whether Pochettino turns into a guy that says, this is how I want to play, and I'm going to try to pick players that fit that, or what we usually get, which is I'm going to try to pick the best 15 guys, and we'll go from there. And it's hard in a country that doesn't have sort of that amazing top level talent to figure that out, to figure out the balance between those things.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating journey. And like you did talk about, playing a back 4, so it doesn't sound like he's really a coach that goes to a back 3/5 a lot, which is kind of been shifting in the global soccer game. There's a lot more 3-5-2s, 3-4-3s, et cetera, 3-4-2-1s, whatever. So I do think it'll be interesting to see how that kind of plays out and if he evolves to adding a back 3 to his system eventually. And I like I said, I think on paper right now, it's more probably about managing our bigger name players at big clubs that I think we need a little bit more output out of in terms of, I think I've talked about this before, that positionally they need to be the best in their position versus the best on the field. I always use Valverde as an example when he plays for Uruguay. Real Madrid starter, unbelievable player, but when he plays for Real Madrid, he's a lockdown, tough, hard-nosed two-way midfielder. He's not a Real Madrid player. He's a Uruguayan, kick the shit out of people, get after kind of player. So I'm going to be interested more about how manages our kind of top-level talent right now. And he's got to be a little excited because Christian's probably at the biggest peak of his form. McKennie's had a rebirth at Juventus. So I think we've got some players now that can fit into a system that he wants to play, which is really exciting. Except for goalkeeper. That's where we talked about first. And then I'm intrigued by the center back. I still think that's a little soft for us. I tell our fans, I think we talked about this, seeing Miles Robinson live, I still think he's at the top of the arc right now for center back pool, which doesn't always line up with some people that just want European players and not MLS players to be starters. But right now, I put Miles Robinson is probably on my list as our number one center back personally.
You stress about goalkeepers. I stress about the forwards. I just want Mauricio Pochettino to pull off the trick he did at Tottenham, get this team firing and scoring goals like crazy, and find the U.S.'s striker finally. After years and years of searching, just make it happen. Just make that happen. You mentioned Zach Steffen there, and we're going to use that as our transition to recapping the Colorado match, which I'll just start off here, and I'll probably take this one from both of you. I think that was the best performance from minute 1 to minute 90 all season long. Zarek Valentin said it on the broadcast. Hard to disagree with him. It was a commanding performance from the get-go against Colorado on Saturday. Manny.
Yeah, I would. It was definitely our most comprehensive game at home, without a shadow of a doubt. I think we could have a good debate about the Charlotte game away being up there. Again, it is so hard to go on the road and play away and dominate a team and do the same thing on the road. So there could be a good debate, but the reality was we, at a time of the year when we needed 3 points and we needed to have a great home result because we hadn't had good home results, whereas on the road we've been outstanding this year. Our fans were craving it, and we've lately been a little bit sluggish start, and everything for the minute 1 was about winning first balls, winning battles, winning duels, creating chances, limiting any type of kind of momentum by the away team. It was a great 90 minutes. It really was. And it ended up being another special night at Allianz Field, which we haven't had as many this year as we'd like.
John?
Yeah, it's not just you that said it was the most comprehensive performance. Eric Ramsey said it in the post-game press conference. Robin Lid said it when we talked to him after the game. It was pretty much widely agreed that from inside the Minnesota United locker room, that's what they felt was their best performance. So it's hard to argue with any of that. And like Manny said, just the fact that we got to hear some Oasis after the game was a different thing for the last few months for sure.
There's been a lot of Oasis playing around Allianz Field and around Minnesota United since the band got back together. I'm just gonna point that out. Yeah, I think this was a really fun one to watch. My big question coming out of this one: did Kelvin Yeboah mean to score off his face like that? You look at the replay, you see him move forward a little bit. No,
I mean, he said what he said after the game was it's instinct, which means no.
It was great.
And I do feel like I should publicly apologize, Robin Lud, because from my angle and from where I was sitting, it looked like he had volleyed that ball about 50 yards wide and it was going out for a throw in, and then it hit Yeboah in the head and glanced into the goal. I saw different angles after the game, and it was darn near on target. Like Steffen dives that way because it's going to be close to being on target. So I'm sorry, Robin Lud, for suggesting that you hit the worst volley of all time and it just happened to hit your teammate in the face and go in the goal.
My answer would be, I'm going to go with instinct and just strikers. You know, the way he changed direction of the ball, and some goalies, some people would duck in that situation. Like, he actually turned his head towards why the ball went in the goal. I'm going to give it to him. When you're that hot and you're finding ways to score, at that point, I think it was the 6th goal in 6 games, and he got another one after that. So I'm going to go with the instinct there. I'm going to go with the goal scorer instinct.
We've seen other goal scorers score off their face at that end of Allianz Field before. It's happened before.
Yeah, but
Uh,
Giassi Zardes, we were talking after the game. Giassi Zardes scored 112 goals in his career off his face by getting hit with a defender's clearance or whatever happened in that game. So it's for Zardes, I would believe it's instinct. He just had a way of getting his head in the way of the ball.
yeah.
I told you
Maybe
this
he was
after the
trying to
game.
head in his forehead and it went off his face. So yeah, sometimes that's where Zardis went. But
Yeah.
I will say, you guys hear me say this all the time. It was a lucky goal, but you create your own luck. And we created our luck. We started playing well, particularly down that left side. Some great combination play between Pereira and Rosales. And it wasn't the first time that we were getting up and kind of creating chances. Great switch by Boxel. It was to me, it was part of the waves of attack. So I really do think the goal was coming, and I think it was deserved, even if it was lucky, and it was. But you got to create your own luck, and we found at Allianz Field it's not easy to create your own luck in games.
Yeah, Minnesota then continued the dominance into the second half, getting a goal almost immediately. And we talk quite frequently on the broadcast, Manny, with you about the need for fast starts, not just in the first half, but also the second half. And it was funny on the broadcast itself, Zarek Valentine started off with his keys to the second half saying they need to score right away, just as Kelvin Yabo is scoring that first goal in the second half to get things started. It was a hilarious bit of just coincidence there, but it's exactly what the Loons needed to continue the performance that they put together in the first half and put it into the second half, really kind of showing Colorado, you're not coming back from this one. You're not getting back into this match. This match really is ours, and you're just going to have to be here for it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's got to be the man of the match in this game because 2 goals, great little finish, clever. Wrong foots the goalie. I think he kind of megged the defender when he had it, and like you said, it was so important we got the first goal. It was so important to put the game to bed early, and it really allowed us to have, I thought, what is just an enjoyable second half where we really, got our shape defensively for the second 45, and we just created chances, and a lot of good players had good games. Our back three were outstanding. Harvey is really getting comfortable with that new position and has done well. Obviously, Tapias has been a little bit of a down moment, and for DS to come in and athletically have a really good game. Boxel, I think the last couple of games has been sharper. There was a lot of good performance. Dotson was a beast all game. It's so funny, the goal was
really turned great
Yeah,
performances in after the Leagues Cup break.
yeah, but you find the ball and you find moments where you want to show stuff when you're playing like that. You hide in games when you're not playing well. You don't find the ball in tough spots. And the fact that Dotson's like, give me the ball. I've been doing this all game. And that's why Colorado backed off, because he had been driving forward and getting the ball wide and battling and winning tough duels, and nobody wanted to get into tackle with him because he kept on kind of battling through them. So it was a great performance where you could argue he's man of the match, but at the end of the day, you talk about number nines and then talk about somebody who's come in and given us goals to allow us to have this great run we've had to make the playoffs. Kelvin has to be the man of the match.
Yeah, I think he along with Hassani Dotson, as you said, have a great shout for it. I think the thing that stood out for me, John, was the fact that we came into this one. We were previewing Colorado, and we said Rafael Navarro, 14 goals, however many assists he has on the season. He's been excellent for them up top. They've got some attack. They've got some really good attacking pieces. And the way the defense and midfield played, it felt like we barely called their names all night long on Saturday.
Yeah. Did Rafael Navarro play on Saturday for sure? I can't remember. Was he was there, right?
I think I saw him complaining
the team
to the
sheet
says
he is.
The second half about he complained in the second half about something. So
I think Jefferson Diaz is he's a funny case because when he came in, everyone thought, all right, there's the right center back in the back three. He's a right footer. He's tall. He'll be perfect there. And after a couple of weeks of training, Eric Ramsey was saying, he can play some right back too. But I think there's an argument to play sort of a back four with Jefferson Diaz at right back. And then randomly, it was like, what if, and I'm just spitballing here, we play him at left center back? And so now I'm just wondering where else Jefferson Diaz on the field might end up playing. I mean, at some point he'll have to play right wing back because everyone on the roster at some point will have to play right wing back for Minnesota United this year. It's part of the deal. But would he be a good defensive midfielder? He kind of played forward in the second half one time because he's tall, and why not kick the ball at him? What else can Jefferson Diaz do? Is he a possibility for U.S. men's national team goalkeeper? Let's just not rule anything out right away.
No, he had a really good game. I thought it was a really good series of games for Jefferson. I thought he was really good against Cincinnati and then lost at home, and then great game against Kansas City, and he followed it up, I thought, with a really solid performance at home. So it's been nice to have his athleticism. With Tapias just kind of losing a little confidence and not quite being there, it's been nice to slot him in. And our back five, 3 shutouts in 3 games. What can you say? It's outstanding.
Yeah. I'm not going to
Miguel Tapias.
Yeah,
I think the big mistake of the season, probably for the whole of the Minnesota United franchise, was Miguel Tapias dyeing his hair blonde because it seemed to just sap him of his whole powers.
That's like every player in the league when they do that. It tends to do that. Not just here. I think that's across the league.
That's right.
So the moral of the story is don't dye your hair blonde, otherwise you lose your soccer powers.
Yeah, we're learning things. We learn as we go.
Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots. That's what we're here for. I think I'm going to morph these 2 games that we're going to talk about here kind of in. I'm not fully done with Colorado, but I think, as you mentioned, Manny, 3 clean sheets in a row. We've talked about the goal scoring seemingly coming around for this team at the right time, but now 3 clean sheets in a row against pretty different competition. You got Sporting Kansas City at the front end of it, but then Colorado and Real Salt Lake, 2 teams that have been pretty good attacking this season, and you're getting clean sheets against them in 2 different kinds of performances. Defense seems to be coming around at the right time as well now, with 3 very good performances in a row. And you can't ask for a better time in the season than the last couple games of the season going into the playoffs to have that happen, Manny.
No, I mean, I like I said, my brain is on the game last night. Oh my gosh. It was defensively outstanding. Just RSL had 10 wins at home. And that was really their go-to, is that they win at home this year. And they didn't have a sniff last night. It was just outstanding. And I think that was a culmination of a really tough battle in Kansas City where they created a lot of chance against us. Let's be honest, that first half was really, we had to kind of get to that halftime. But then these next 2 games, back 3 to back 5 so fluidly and just so tough. Really, really impressive. Really, really impressive.
And of course, now that they finally figured that out, Michael Boxall suspended for Saturday. So there you go.
So because of the red card, I guess we can just jump into that conversation as well at this point. The red card for spitting from Vera at Michael Boxall. Michael Boxall gets the yellow because of his reaction to being spit on, which arguably any of us would have had that reaction as well. Obviously, VAR took a look afterwards, after the yellow card was administered, gave Vera a red card. Is there a shout for overturning this so he doesn't miss the Saturday game, or is that not a possibility, Manny?
I mean, technically, you can go to the league and you can kind of appeal any calls. It is 99.999% that you almost never would win an appeal for a yellow card, because now you're kind of going against the referee's on-field kind of just his own acumen, his own kind of belief system for reffing the game that day. So, and it's an expensive fine if you actually don't win the appeals. Or if it's like kind of like a crazy appeal. So I mean, I'm almost positive we'll wake up today and not appeal this. So it's just one of those unfortunate incidents. But I think we got to talk about spitting gate, guys, because that is where this starts. And there's so many ways I could go to this. First of all, at first I was like, what's Boxall doing? He didn't really get hit. And you're like, he's not usually the guy that just goes down and dives. So I'm like,
we thought on the broadcast from the angle that we saw, we thought he got punched or something. And we looked at the replays like, oh, he got nicked. I don't know why he's reacting. Then we saw for real that he got spit. We're like, oh, okay, now we understand.
Yeah, I felt like, as he got hit in the back and then he got up, and I'll be honest, he should get an award for keeping his cool and not just like going crazy.
Only getting a yellow card was
He
a
went
real
down
accomplishment.
first. It was like, what WTF? And then he got up and he's like, WTF? And he's like, I am pissed. And he kind of goes at him, but he still kept his cool. Like, I remember when Tab Ramos spit in John Hark's mouth years ago in a game, and it was a full-on loogie, like just
Oh no.
insane. And it's there's got to be a multiple game both suspension and fine. This is not, the league will not tolerate spitting.
What happened after that? Was there a full-on brawl? Like, did they square off like hockey?
Well, I mean, Tab had just kind of lost his mind, and I love Tab, and we're good friends, and he's completely a post-career doesn't have that kind of crazy passion. There was probably that was built up of years of friendship and national team camaraderie, and then kind of the competition between the two, DC and New York, was pretty intense back in the day. It was just wild. It was wild. Like I think that's where the precedent of this, the MLS is going to have to go back, because there hasn't been a lot of spitting situations since VAR. And this one was just right in Poxel's face, and it was just ridiculous. It was just, I was just watching it once I realized what it was. I couldn't believe that he did it. Like I said, it's spitting gate this morning for us in Minnesota is alive and well. I still think it's surreal that it happened. But yeah, unfortunate for Poxel. In some ways, we got him for the home game. He'll be ready for the playoffs, and he does have the international break. So I'm trying to look at glass half full here. Let's go to Vancouver, fresh legs. Sometimes that's a good thing for a coach to not even have to make the decision that we have to put fresh legs in the field to get these points in Vancouver. I'm excited about it being a 6-point game, by the way, guys. With all the results going our way now, not only can we jump Vancouver, but we can take points away from them that they can't get, and they have a game in hand. So, there is some positives that, Boxel gets a little rest before the international break and hopefully come back a little fresher when we play St. Louis on the 19th.
I think that's the crazy part for me, John, is that a player decided in the age of VAR, when we have cameras everywhere reviewing everything, we've got this fancy new replay center down in Texas that takes a look at every single angle, and he decides, yeah, I'm still going to spit.
It'd be like
just wild.
It'd be like a goalkeeper pulled out a cell phone in the middle of the game and was making a phone call. Like, what is even happening right now? How is this possibly happening?
It was surreal. It really was. It was.
Yeah. And it was funny because Vera runs into Boxall, and Boxall went down like grabbing his face, which I thought was just like being around Chicho Arango for a game. Michael Boxall lost track of how to behave on a soccer field. Like, why is he going down grabbing?
That was a physical battle between those two.
Get hit in the face, yeah. But
if you want to geek out, the play was fascinating because there was a little bit of, there's always shenanigans in games, and I guarantee Vera was watching the Boxall Arango kind of physical battle, and there was a lot of little cheeky moments between the two of them hitting each other. And I don't know if you noticed, Arango got Dane late in the game once too with a little extra something, and Dane kept his cool. Dane didn't actually try to roll around and time waste. He was really kind of got up quickly. But that play with Vera, that he kicked the ball out for a throw. We got the ball deep in the channel late in the game. I think that was an expression of frustration when he kind of kicks the ball up the line, and maybe borderline yellow card at that point because you're not supposed to kick the ball late. And if you look, Harvey kind of pushes him. Yeah. But not enough to get a yellow, but enough to kind of piss Vera off that he's like, pissed. We're not getting the result we want at home. We've been kind of bad the last month. Our identity of our teams dropped since the All-Star break. You can kind of just see is the frustration that he's jogging back towards getting place for the long throw in. And then if you look, Boxall does kind of go into his line of running back into the box. And I love it, center back v center back, and they've had some set piece battles already. So there was a lot of shenanigans leading up to Vera's decision-making process, but this is the age where you got to keep your cool. You've said it with VAR, you cannot lose your cool because you'll be found out. Whether it's in-game or post-game, there's certain things you cannot do. And you cannot, in this day and age, get away with spitting on a guy in a game. It just won't happen.
I will say, totally unpredictable that Vera would do that. The most predictable thing was Carlos Harvey and Chicho Arango almost getting into a fist fight afterwards. Like I
Oh
would
yeah,
have
and
bet, I
Joseph
would have bet
somehow being
absolute money
involved
on
too,
it.
and
Yeah,
Joseph
exactly.
somehow being around there too. Like
Yep.
that Spanish conversation would have been awesome.
The only thing unexpected was that somehow Dane St. Clair didn't get in the middle of all of that from 95 yards away.
There was a lot of talking about this Real Salt Lake game and the defense and how it really hampered and hassled and harassed Real Salt Lake's offense. There was a lot of physical play between all three of the Loons. Well, I guess the four Loons defenders on the field last night, Josef Rosales, Carlos Harvey, Jefferson Diaz, Michael Boxell. There was a lot of physical play between those guys and Chicho Arango. That clearly was the game plan. It's just to get in his face, not give him space, and just be very physical from minute 1 to minute 90, Manny. It was impressive to watch, and it clearly got in his head early because he took the running swipe at Dane early on in the match at a reset, at a play reset, which Zarek didn't like in the broadcast booth, but you could tell early on that it was frustrating him, and that probably built off of just scoring one goal in his last 10 matches and none in his last 5 in league play.
Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating game last night, and I'll say it.
You might be the only one.
No, I'll say why, because I know the game for the average fan. It's a reality that sometimes soccer games are just ugly, not fun games to watch. And there's no doubt if you're neutral last night, that was just one of those nights where it's like, oh my God, this is really not good soccer. And I think it's true, but I think there was some levels and reasoning why, particularly tactically. And I think if we look at the game last night, the way RSL decided to play, at first my brain was like, we're really sloppy with the ball.
Mm-hmm.
As I kind of actually like looked at the game and how it went, RSL had a insane middle press that I thought was outstanding and really hurt us. Like it was high energy. It was, you guys are not going to get through this middle line. Every time you go into this space, we are going to create chaos and win the ball back. And they did. What I would say is usually when that happens and a team's trying to find an identity to score, particularly at home, you need to do that and then go on offense and get chances. And this is where I have to give so much credit how I thought the game was so fascinating. Was like RSL did that and they tried to create chances off the turnover and they couldn't get anything. Our defense was so good last night. And again, I want to say how impressive for 90 minutes defensively to give one good chance away and maybe a decent free kick in altitude in a key game in different ways for both teams, I think was really impressive. And I think the middle press for me wasn't something I usually see by RSL. I usually kind of see either a high press or them taking over the tempo of the game with altitude and really keeping possession. And I felt like it's an example of RSL's, their month is kind of dipped. They kind of don't know how to get Arango off the mark. They kind of don't know how to play after selling Gomez, who is so fast and extended their team to create space for Arango that I think there was a little panic in RSL. Like I really do think that they've dipped in terms of how they want to play and then kind of enter these playoffs. And it kind of showed last night that they ran out of ideas based on they can't extend the field, with speed with Gomez. And now Arango is a little bit easier to deal with. I give us credit for really dealing with the sloppy possession we had early, but defensively being locked down. And then the game opened up, and I kind of wish the red card had happened a few minutes earlier because I do think we'd have gone and won that game. I think the games some stuff would have opened up for us eventually. But overall, I will say, yeah, in a cheeky smile, it was a fascinating game because it was ugly, because it wasn't good soccer, because there was so few chances that, even the announcers were fighting to say, oh my gosh, we thought this was going to be a wide open game, and it ended up being the exact opposite. But we have to be excited as Minnesota fans. I mean, that was a defensive masterpiece, and it really bodes well going into the playoffs when you play a game like that you can lock a team like that down. It gets you excited for what the playoffs can bring.
At what point, Manny? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I wanted to say something nice about Minnesota because and this goes back actually something non-cynical and positive about Minnesota. Okay. So just stick with me here. This has happened a couple of times over the last couple of games, especially after the Leagues Cup. There have been a number of times when an opposing team has been pressing high or, like Manny said, pressing in the middle, and Minnesota has been playing out of the back and using the ball to beat the press and create a chance that way. And I've seen that 3, 4, 5 times, a technical level that I don't think that we've seen from Minnesota a lot in the past few years. And I was really impressed by that, even late in the first half against Salt Lake. Like Manny said, to start the game, there are a lot of wayward passes, guys just kicking it out of bounds and stuff like that. But as the half wore on, they climbed back into it in a way they did not earlier this season in Colorado. Same kind of altitude problem.
Very
that
similar.
game in Colorado, Minnesota just sort of gave up on passing the ball full stop. They completed 120 passes the whole game, which is one of the lowest numbers since they started tracking pass metrics in MLS, because they just couldn't get on the ball, couldn't pass it to each other at all. This version of Minnesota, the not early season version of Minnesota, but this version now has the technical level that can sort of build back up and start passing the ball and end up with like a 15, 16 pass sequence that somehow ends up with Carlos Harvey in the penalty area taking a shot. And that's a
good shot, by the way. I think he
had a good shot.
He scored it. McMath was cheating on that play.
Yep. So to look at that sort of technical level, that's a club in the bag that Minnesota, I don't think, had not only earlier in the year, but in previous years. So I think those kind of moments where they've been able to use the ball and pass through a press have been impressive to me.
Yeah, I think that was one of the more impressive performances. Yeah. Question for you, Manny. At what point in a first half where it's going like the way it did last night, does the mentality switch to, and we've talked about this a couple times as well, does the mentality switch to, all right, let's just get through this half and get to a reset point and be able to just kind of just reset at halftime and come back out and try something different? At what point do you switch as a team from, all right, let's try and battle these guys toe to toe here, and then just switch mentally in the middle of that first half to, all right, clearly it's not going our way right now. We can switch at halftime, but let's just get through this first half.
Yeah, I would say that was more like Kansas City, to get to half and switch and do things. I felt like, I sometimes use the metaphor that sometimes games are like boxing matches, and RSL wasn't throwing any punches. So I didn't have the same feeling we just need to get to half. I didn't have that like, oh my God, let's get to half. And then Eric's got to tactically get these guys going or scream and yell to get the energy level up, one of the two. But I didn't have that sense this half. I always felt like the game would open up for us if we continue to play that kind of defense, just because they're at home and they want to create something. So for me, again, I thought we were going to be a little bit more open with our chances, but it wasn't. I still thought the subs were really good in the second half. I thought they came in and gave us some good energy. I didn't think their subs did a lot. Maybe Diego Luna had a few moments there that led to that good chance of Dana had the great save. But I didn't have this like, oh, let's get to half. I agree. We weren't playing great offense. We weren't creating a lot of chances and moving the ball. But the punches they were throwing were really soft. So I didn't feel a panic. Maybe a little bit like in Kansas City, where if I'm being honest, the half plus the break was a really helpful for us to kind of see out that game.
Yeah. You mentioned the subs there, and it felt like Tanny's substitution at halftime for Joaquin Perea was a huge difference maker in how Minnesota set up in the second half, John. It felt like it brought some energy. It brought a different style to how they played, and it was a really effective substitution at halftime.
It did feel to me by about the 60th minute, both teams sort of said to themselves, all right, here's what we're going to do. We want to be defensively solid, and we'll try to hit him in transition. And then you just had two teams staring at each other from either side of the halfway line. Like, no, how about you guys have the, like,
Red Rover, send your attacker on over.
Send your fullbacks up. It'll work. I promise. It's going to work for sure. Just push some guys into the attack. Come over here. So it did turn into a little bit of just ping pong and kicking lumps out of each other a little bit. But I do think that Pereira struggled in the first half. He didn't really seem to be in the game, and maybe that's the altitude, and maybe that's just acclimation to MLS, or maybe he just had an off night. But Oluwaseyi is always going to bring energy, and it gives Minnesota a different look to have two of those guys up front rather than just the one.
Having three of them on the field at the same time with Bongi, Tanny, and Kelvin as well, just having that speed on the field certainly makes a difference.
Yeah, come on, RSL, come bring your guys forward. We don't have fast guys that'll get in behind you on a transition moment. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I thought the stalemate was interesting. And then I thought our subs, like I said, Sangbin gave some great energy. Fraga gave some great energy. Obviously, you mentioned Tani. It really, I thought, hurt. So I felt like Salt Lake really got hurt by our subs. They really couldn't get any energy or momentum going at home. And again, I want to point out 10 wins at home. They've been lights out there. And particularly with us not creating a lot of chances to kind of absorb any kind of stress and pressure, there just wasn't a lot. It was like you said, just a stalemate, but we really created the stalemate, which I was really impressed by.
Manny, I have a question for you because
Yes.
one thing that got mentioned on the broadcast a lot last night was that Minnesota had never won an MLS at Real Salt Lake. It's a little strange because now that's 6 draws in 8 games plus 2 Real Salt Lake wins. But as the old people remember, you and the NASL version of the Minnesota Stars went to RSL and won in the U.S. Open Cup there. So I want you to give us some memories, give us some reminiscences of the last time Minnesota won in Utah.
I would say that was one of my favorite wins ever as a coach. I'll start with, because back then you used to bid for the Open Cups, and if we won the home game, and I think they ended up paying us $100,000 to have it at RSL, which at that point we could not turn down that kind of money.
At the time, that was like a huge deal. Not just like, oh, $100,000, that'll help a little bit. That was like, oh, well, I guess everybody's getting paid for 2 more weeks now. This is awesome.
Yeah, and RSL had a great team that year. They were that was the year, the kind of years where they were winning the MLS Cup and they were in and out winning the Open Cup. And I think they were like, we got to win the Open Cup this year. Let's just pay the $100,000. Let's do it. And it was we had a great day. 3-1, we won. We scored early, played great. It was a great Minnesota win. I think it was one of the better, more comprehensive wins we've had as a club, particularly away there. So I like that. Yes, and it was great win. Just can't say enough about it. 1-0 up, 1-1, 2 goals, 1 in the first half, 2 in the second half was outstanding. Just
So did at any point you reach out to Eric Ramsey last week and give him the secrets of winning at Real Salt Lake, since you're the last Minnesota coach to do it?
My brain is still thinking we played well at RSL because of that, probably, because I feel like we haven't won there, but we've gotten a lot more points. It doesn't have the same connotation for me as Kansas City and Seattle did for some reason. So when I heard that stat, I was a little bit surprised, and maybe that's why, because we have one iteration, and we've gotten some good ties there. Like I said, I feel like we've handled them pretty well at RSL, where I think we've probably tied a bunch of those games.
Yeah.
Well, last night's draw didn't allow Minnesota to clinch the playoff spot themselves, as we mentioned, but they did get a little help. San Jose getting their 6th win of the season, this time against FC Dallas in a 3-2 game that kicked off an hour after us. So we were all scoreboard watching and flipping over Apple TV broadcasts as soon as Minnesota United's game was done to watch that one play out. But San Jose securing their 6th win of the season puts the Loons into the playoffs, a big result in that. And now the Loons look towards playoff seeding, where they sit just 1 point behind Vancouver, who have a game in hand. They sit a point above Portland for the home playoff or the home wild card game to host that game. So plenty still to fight for. And we mentioned Vancouver. They're the next opponent. Manny, we said Michael Boxall out for that game due to yellow card accumulation. What's the switch tactically in the defense? How do we see Eric Ramsey handling that absence in the defense that has played, as we mentioned, so well this season?
Yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting kind of couple days to build up for this game in terms of what Eric Ramsey wants to do. Certainly, they're going to wake up today. They'll fly directly to Vancouver. First thing they'll do is assess, kind of the physical loads of everybody and the health of everybody, and then he's got a lot of decisions to make here. Again, you do have a hardened journeyman, who's been really good for a lot of the year for us, Tapias, that could kind of fill in the back 3 if that's what we want to do. He can also go to a back 4. I think it's going to be a fascinating kind of build up tactically. Vancouver had a tough loss last night, so they're not maybe in a great space mentally for us. This is a 6-point game. I think we got to go for it. I think if we want to climb the table to 8, 7, or even 6 here, it really gets exciting now that if we can get 6 points in 2 games. And this weekend's game is really challenging because it's a balance of you saw the fatigue on the field last night, 2 games in 4 days in altitude. Now traveling even further west to play in Vancouver on turf on Saturday. I think it's a midday game, and it's a 6:30 kickoff, which would be 4:30. So you're even, my brain even goes a couple hours less rest than if we started later. It's a tough call here. How do you replace Boxall? Well, not easy to replace. He was great in the air, by the way, last night, particularly on set pieces. So a lot of work for the staff for the next couple of days to build up preparation for this one, both in terms of getting the guys ready to go and then deciding if you want fresh legs versus bringing fresh legs on later in the game.
Yeah, it'll be certainly interesting. Vancouver, their run of form has not been good. We mentioned Real Salt Lakes wasn't good. Vancouver, winless in the last 4 league matches. Yes, they had the Canadian Championship win, though that was in penalties. And so they haven't been going well of late, as they've kind of been scrapping to hold on to their first round playoff spot. But as we said, they've got a game in hand. While Minnesota will have an absence, John, Vancouver will also have a big absence. No Fafa Picault. He was sent off, 2 yellow cards last night, 9 goals, 5 assists for him this season. They've still got a heck of an attack in Brian White and Ryan Gauld, who have 15 goals and 9 goals and 2 assists and 12 assists, respectively, between those guys. They have been excellent in the attack this season, have White and Gauld, and it'll be interesting to see how the Loons shut them down on Saturday, John.
Do we know if Ryan Gauld is going to play on Saturday? He hasn't played the last couple of games for Vancouver, and I don't know what the severity of that injury is. But
you're missing both Gauld and Fafa Picault. That's a big hit for their offense.
And Minnesota has 3 clean sheets in a row. This being MLS, the only thing I know is that Vancouver's getting at least 5 on Saturday.
I should have seen that one coming.
It could be 6-5, it could be 9-5, it could be 5-0. But I know that for MLS, that's what's going to happen.
The last couple of games out there have been some pretty high scoring games. You got the 3-2 last year. Taking a look a couple of years ago, 3-1 for Minnesota, 2-1, 2-2. There's been a couple of high score. There's 4-2 a couple of years ago back in 2018. There's been some high scoring games out in Vancouver between these two sides.
We make a lot of jokes about MLS After Dark, but I feel like Vancouver is one of the centers of MLS After Dark nonsense. It feels
but
like
we don't get it after
always
dark because we don't get it after dark this week because
MLS
it's at 6:30
before dark. When does the sun set in Vancouver? When do the lights go down in BC Place?
MLS in the afternoon. Manny,
MLS.
What's the scouting report on Vancouver for this Saturday? What do the Loons fans have to look out for against Vanni Sartini's Whitecaps?
Yeah, I like that you mentioned Sartini, by the way. We should make sure our audience knows about keep an eye on that guy on the sideline. He's one of the kind of guys to watch in MLS games. So, but no, and listen, Sartini's done a good job with this team this year. They've been one of the better teams in the West, one of the more kind of consistent up until this 4-game winless streak. And if our fans remember, it was a tough game at home. It was a tough loss. I think we left the stadium, everybody, feeling like we've got to make sure we don't get swept against this team because they really took it to us at home. And a lot of that was Brian White. His movement is key. He's one of these forwards who's just so honest and is going to make it a tough day and make honest runs in the box. And he is going to be physical. And if we allow him space to make runs in the box, he will punish you. So I think one of the keys is a little bit similar to Rango, but more physical. And maybe not quite as a clinical finisher, that we have to make sure we deal with him. And we're honest for 90 minutes in terms of how we box defend and make sure that we are honest with his running and we're honest with kind of dealing with his physicality by us being physical against him as well, which, I think Diaz and Harvey and whoever else goes in there, if it does become a back 3, are up for. And ultimately it won't. This will be a tough game. There's gonna be some physically tired legs on the field, and again, this is not the best surface to play. It's a little bit tough. I don't think it's the toughest audience. I think Vancouver's fan base is very supportive, but I don't think they make the game daunting for us. It's a place where I think we can get points for sure.
Are you saying Canadians can't get angry as a crowd?
No, now you're going to get us in trouble if I go that far.
It's not what I'm here to do, is not get people in trouble. Any other notes about this game for against Vancouver coming up Saturday? 6 p.m. Pre-match show, 6:30 p.m. kickoff, an early one for a West Coast game, which I kind of like, not having a 9:30 kickoff for a West Coast game. As much as I like the MLS After Dark chaos, I will like not having to drive back home from Minneapolis at, 1 a.m. would be nice to not have to do. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Any other notes before we move on to predicting this weekend's slate of games? Nothing?
Anything for you guys? No, I mean, I'm excited.
I got nothing. All I know is that somehow Minnesota's defensive solution for Vancouver is going to involve Jefferson Diaz. He's going to play 3 different positions: center back, right back, striker. More Jefferson Diaz. That's the Minnesota solution.
I love this time of year when it's 6-point games. I just think it's kind of like a mini playoff. You are right there with the team that you're trying to catch, and you can prevent them getting points while you can get points. So some of my favorite matchups prior to the playoffs.
And nothing beats October as the weather turns back into July. Endless July. July forever.
80 degrees and sunny forever. Who couldn't ask for better soccer weather, especially in October?
Yeah.
Is this what it's like in San Diego? Like, is this how people live in San Diego all the time? Oh, it's 80 degrees and sunny again today. Boy, this is rough.
I like the variety. Don't get me wrong. Let's predict some of these games that will have an impact on the Loons standings coming up here going into Decision Day, which can't believe we're already almost at Decision Day. One of my favorite days of the year. Always a spectacle. Always fun to just have like 3 different screens up in the broadcast booth, watching the other games and how they impact the Minnesota standing. So let's jump into this. Let's go to Portland, Dallas. This one on Sunday. So we're starting off kind of at the back end of the weekend. Portland, Dallas. Dallas, we know, coming off that loss that eliminated them from playoff contention. Portland fighting for their playoff lives. This one in Portland, Manny.
I mean, I'm gonna pick Dallas, but that's just being a homer. So
and my reasons are that's what I want to happen, says me.
Reluctantly, I don't think that's gonna happen, unfortunately.
I don't think Dallas is gonna play all that well 2 days after they were eliminated from the playoff chase by one of the worst teams in MLS history. I don't believe that Dallas is gonna come back and win that one.
So you're thinking the trio of 14 goal scorers, 14 plus goal scorers for Portland will have fun on Saturday against Dallas, a Dallas team that might already have the flip-flops on.
Possibly during the game. I think the referee needs to check and make sure everybody's wearing cleats and before they get out onto the field.
Yeah, I feel like this one's going to be Portland all the way as well. Even though like Manny, I want Dallas because it does help Minnesota. It would give them that home game for the wild card round.
Listen, I will say there's a lot of pressure waking up in Portland today. I mean, a month ago they were kind of the team of the Western Conference du jour and the offense, and they're just going to shoot up the table, and they have dropped some bad points and bad games over the last couple of weeks. That it's going to be tighter for them than they think, just because last night was another one where they had a team that really was not playing for really anything, and they didn't even get a point out of the game. So there is a possibility here where Dallas can catch them a little bit based on the amount of energy they expended last night to try to get back into the game. They couldn't. So mentally and physically, I do think in a weird way, Portland's a little bit more beat down than Dallas, where they might be a little more relaxed going into this game based on they're not playing for anything. And they might play some players that are hungry to show that they want to be here next year in Dallas. So not an easy moment for Portland when you drop some points at home like they did last night.
Next game, I'm going to ask you guys to predict Colorado, Seattle. Colorado sitting 4 points above the Loons on the standings. Both teams have played 32 games this season. This one in Colorado. Seattle has been on an absolute tear over the last couple months, jumping now up to 3rd place in the Western Conference. When we played them earlier in the season, they were well out of the playoff hunt at that point, and now they're just 3rd place in the Western Conference, 2 points behind LAFC, still a ways off of LA Galaxy. They're not catching them for 1st place in the conference, but Seattle on an absolute tear. Colorado been struggling of late. This one in Colorado. John, I'll start with you.
Is Seattle the most genuinely annoying team in MLS in this way? For like the first 15 weeks of the season, it was, is Seattle's run finally over? Should they fire Brian Schmetzer? what is going on with the Sounders? They keep getting guys sent off. What is happening? Then if you just go to sleep and you look at the standings, you're like, they're going to host a home playoff game. If the season was 3 weeks longer, they'd win the Western Conference. How does this keep happening? What is Seattle's deal? What is in the water out there? I don't understand. Anyway, Seattle's going to win.
Is there a more consistent team in sports than the Seattle Sounders, knowing year in and year out, you're going to struggle to begin the season, but you're going to go on a run starting in May, and you're just going to be completely unstoppable going into the playoffs? Is there a more consistent team in American sports?
The only thing more consistent is the New York Red Bulls finishing 6th in front of 1,200 fans.
And making the playoffs every year. Somehow.
And making the playoffs every year in 7th place.
Yeah. Manny?
I got 2-2. So
2-2.
I do think Seattle is really an impressive franchise at the end of the day. You gotta take your hat off to their ability to always expect to make a run and be better at the end of the year, which I think is a cool thing about this sport and this league, and that teams are rewarded if they can build as a group as the season goes on and deal with the pressure and adversity. And they have now got a culture of expectation of that, and it's come true. And it's not easy. You want to say it's easy to do. It's a credit to them, credit to Coach Schmetzer, credit to their franchise for consistently now, proving doubters wrong, that it doesn't matter how you start. It really matters how you grow into a season. So in a weird way, Seattle, though, then plays Portland that final game of the year, I think, which will be huge and potentially huge for us. So in a weird way, I'm kind of want Seattle to now do well the last couple of games. So they go into that Portland game hungry to get points and maybe make sure we're higher up the table.
I know,
you heard it here first. Someone involved in Minnesota United wishing well for the Seattle Sounders. Never happened before.
John's just here to get you in trouble, Manny.
That's fine. This one, he's right. I mean, I can't say he's wrong.
This is the first time ever, and I want to mark this. I want to just remember today.
I like it. I know mathematically it's possible, so skip that answer. Can the Loons make up that 4-point gap with 2 games remaining against Colorado and overtake them for 5th place in the Western Conference? Do you think that with who's on the schedule for Minnesota, who's on the schedule for Colorado, it's hosting Seattle, and then I believe they're at Austin on decision day. Yep, at Austin on decision day. Can we see the Loons jumping up to 5th place, Manny?
If we get 6 points, and we know MLS decision day is crazy, anything can happen. I think we do have the cliche of take a game at a time, but getting that point last night was huge. It really was. It allows us to get 4 points out of 6 on this really, really tough road trip. If this was 2 months ago, I think everybody in the league would say that, well, this is the hardest road trip of any team in the league. And again, maybe not now, but that would have been like pretty easy to say and arguable. And so for me, if we get the 3 points in the weekend and then 6 points in our last 2 games, 100% yes. I think there's still a lot of craziness to happen here.
John?
Yeah, I'll answer that question about 8 p.m. on Saturday. How's that sound? Then I'll know for sure.
Cheating, John. Cheating.
Cop out. All right, the other match that we'll be certainly keeping our eyes on. This is a little bit of a bigger gap. I don't know that they'll be able to make this one, but Houston at St. Louis City. Houston 5 points up above Minnesota in 5th place in the Western Conference. Manny, I'll start here with you. St. Louis hosting this one.
I think Houston's going to figure out how to win this game. So they've done a great job, and they get a lot of possession. Ben Olsen's done a great job. They've had a lot of injuries, and they still seem to find points and win. So Houston's another one of these teams that has really had a great turnaround this year, and has been pretty darn consistent all year. So I think they're going to find a way to win. John?
Yeah, Houston feels like that unfortunate team that it's a really good team that's injured at the wrong time of the season. Yeah. Like this is a bad time for all of your guys to get hurt, and that's what's happening to Houston. So I don't know. I think this will be a draw, but that's just because everybody's hurt for Houston. So we'll see.
8 of the 9 spots in the Western Conference playoffs locked up already. Just 2 teams fighting for that final 9th spot right now.
Are they fighting for it though? Really?
No. It's a 6-point gap.
Portland
That's a pretty big
could
gap.
Forfeit the last 2 games and make the playoffs. So
yeah, Austin has Austin has to go to LAFC or LA Galaxy. They'll be probably eliminated late Saturday night, unfortunately, for the race for that one. So decision day will have in the Western Conference, at least. I don't know about the Eastern Conference, which has about 18 teams fighting for those last two spots as usual in the Western Conference. But I think decision day, it seems like in the Western Conference, we'll have all the spots locked up. Just be where those teams will be situated. My last question for you before signing out for the week. Who's the shakiest team in the Western Conference heading into the playoffs? Looking at it, because you talked about Houston being injured at the wrong time. Colorado, Real Salt Lake are starting to have a little bit of late season troubles. Portland certainly has fallen off lately. Who's the shakiest team in the Western Conference playoffs, John?
Salt Lake. I think Real Salt Lake is the shakiest team right now. They're trying to find their post Gomez identity, and especially in attack. And Arango is, Chicho's Arango is an amazing player, but they're trying to figure out how to use all their pieces together now that they've sold their most important piece. And it doesn't. Even last night's game aside, I think you look at them and go, they might finish with hosting a first round playoff series, but you don't look at them and think, wow, this is the team that's got something to make a playoff run.
Manny?
Every team. I mean, it's just being honest.
I like it.
If this was the East, I mean, you've got Miami, Columbus, Cincinnati, Orlando, rock solid. So obviously the bottom, it's wide open, but that's definitive. I think we've talked about Greg Vanney and the Galaxy, and they have proven a lot of people wrong that people thought their defense would get leaky. It hasn't. They've gotten better and better as the season gone on. He mentioned the Marco Royce addition. So maybe the Galaxy are steadfast, but I don't think a lot of teams in the West fear to play them necessarily. They know they're good offensively, but I think they can compete against them. So it's every team. I think every team is shakier in the West than the East this year, personally. So I think it bodes well for Minnesota United. I'm saying that as like getting the playoffs and playing well.
Having a momentum, which we've seen has been key.
You have a potential for a good run in the West, for sure.
Yeah. I think having the momentum late in the season, as we've seen, Sporting Kansas City rode that momentum to at least the semifinals last year in the Western Conference. Columbus rode their momentum to a title last season. We knew they were good, but they went on a late season run that helped them in the playoffs. We've seen that momentum drive teams throughout the playoffs, and I think having the momentum late in the season for Minnesota is a good sign to pick it up. Boys, I'm looking forward to it on Saturday night, 6 p.m. pre-match show on 1500 ESPN with Dan Terrar, Zarek Valentine, and myself. For that one, 6:30 p.m. kickoff on MLS Season Pass and 1500 ESPN. Looking forward to not a late night affair on the West Coast this time around. The second to last game of the season with decision day right around the corner. Boys, it's been fun to talk to you. Loons fans, thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you right back here next week. And thanks again to the production staff of Grace Dearson, Evan Entler, and Kyle Hayward for putting this on every week. We'll talk to you next week.